I never thought my life would turn into something out of a crime novel. But here I am, trying to make sense of the past while figuring out if the future is even worth looking forward to. My name's Jake, and if you had told me a year ago that my wife, Lauren, would vanish without a trace and that I'd later find out she was keeping the biggest secret of all, I would have laughed in your face. Lauren and I had been married for almost 12 years. We weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid, strong, even. We had 2 kids, a home filled with memories, and a life that felt like it was finally settling into something good. Then, one night, during the Southern Straits race, everything changed. We'd taken the boat out like we always did, sailing through rough waves, the wind howling against the sails. I wasn't feeling great, something I ate, maybe, so I went below deck to rest. When I came back up, Lauren was gone. Just, gone. I searched everywhere, called for her until my voice gave out. Nothing. No sign of her. The Coast Guard combed the waters for days, but they never found a body. People said it was an accident, that she must have fallen overboard. I wanted to believe that, I really did. But then the detectives came. And they had questions I wasn't ready for. After Lauren vanished, the days blurred into one long, agonizing stretch of waiting. Waiting for the Coast Guard to call, waiting for any sign, any clue that would explain what happened to my wife. But as the hours turned into days, then weeks, the reality began to settle in. Lauren wasn't coming back. At first, everyone assumed it was just a tragic accident. The water had been rough that night, the wind unpredictable. Maybe she lost her footing. Maybe she went overboard and the current took her before I even realized she was gone. I told myself those things over and over, trying to make sense of it. But deep down, something didn't sit right. The detectives arrived about a month after the search had been called off. 2 of them, Detective Matt Carson, a grizzled guy in his late 40s with tired eyes, and his younger partner, Detective Eric Nolan, who was still trying to prove himself. They were polite at first, but I could tell they weren't just here to offer condolences. "We just have a few questions, Jake," Carson said, pulling out a notepad. "Standard procedure in cases like this." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Of course. They started with routine stuff, where we had been sailing, the last time I saw her, how she had been acting that day. But then Nolan leaned forward and asked, "Did Lauren seem distracted lately? Stressed?" The question caught me off guard. "I mean, yeah, maybe a little. She had a lot going on at work." Carson exchanged a glance with Nolan before he continued. "Did she ever mention a guy named Brandon Collingsworth?" My stomach dropped. "Who?" "Brandon Collingsworth. He worked with your wife. Accountant at her firm." I shook my head, completely at a loss. "No, she never mentioned him." "Why?" Carson sighed, flipping through his notes. "We have reason to believe that Lauren and Brandon were involved." I let out a breathless laugh. "That's impossible." "She wouldn't," but the words died in my throat. "Wouldn't she?" Looking back, there had been little signs, things I hadn't noticed, or refused to notice. The late nights at the office, the hushed phone calls, the way she sometimes seemed a million miles away even when she was sitting right next to me. But I had always trusted Lauren. We had been through too much together for me to think otherwise. "That's a lie," I said finally, but my voice didn't sound as sure as I wanted it to. "We're not saying it's a fact," Nolan cut in. "We're saying that we have sources, people at her company, who claim they saw them together. And not just at work." I felt sick. My hands clenched into fists, and I forced myself to take a slow, steadying breath. Even if that were true, what does that have to do with her disappearing? Carson hesitated, choosing his next words carefully. "Sometimes, when people are confronted with secrets they don't want exposed, they make drastic choices." The meaning of his words hit me like a brick to the chest. They weren't just implying an affair. They were suggesting that Lauren's disappearance wasn't an accident. That maybe, just maybe, she hadn't fallen overboard at all. Maybe she had run. Or worse, maybe someone had made sure she never came back. And just like that, my world crumbled all over again. I sat there, staring at the detectives, my mind blank except for the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "You're saying, what, exactly?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse. "That she ran off. That someone killed her." Carson exhaled slowly. "We're saying that there are inconsistencies, Jake. We can't rule anything out. She wouldn't leave me. She wouldn't leave our kids." My own words felt hollow as soon as they left my mouth. "Wouldn't she?" The thought burned through my chest like acid. Nolan leaned in. "Look, we understand this is a lot to take in. But we need to go through everything, every possibility. You said you weren't feeling well that night, right? That's why you went below deck." I nodded, rubbing my temple. "Yeah. I started feeling nauseous out of nowhere. I thought it was just seasickness, but that never happens to me. Maybe it was something I ate before we set sail." Carson frowned. "Did Lauren eat the same thing you did?" I blinked, caught off guard. "No. She said she wasn't hungry before we left." Neither detective said anything for a moment, but something unspoken passed between them. I swallowed hard. "What? What are you thinking?" Carson hesitated, then chose his words carefully. "It's possible you were drugged, Jake." I almost laughed. "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Nolan said. "Think about it, she tells you she's not hungry, but you get sick out of nowhere. You go below deck. And when you come back up, she's gone. That's an awfully convenient timeline, don't you think?" I wanted to argue, to shut them down, but the more I thought about it, the more the pieces stopped fitting together. Lauren wasn't reckless. She wasn't the type to make stupid mistakes on the water. She had been sailing for years, longer than I had. If she had fallen overboard, wouldn't I have at least heard something? A splash, a scream, anything. And then there was Brandon Collingsworth. The name I hadn't even heard until today, but suddenly, he was in the middle of my wife's disappearance. My stomach churned. I didn't want to ask the next question, but I had to. "Do you think Brandon was involved?" Carson exchanged another glance with Nolan. "We're looking into him. But we haven't been able to track him down since the night Lauren disappeared." "What do you mean, track him down?" My throat went dry. "He hasn't shown up to work. His apartment is empty. No credit card activity. It's like he vanished off the face of the earth." I clenched my fists under the table. If this guy had something to do with Lauren's disappearance, if she had left me and the kids for him, if she had planned this. I stopped myself before I could finish that thought. No. That wasn't who she was. Or at least, that wasn't who I thought she was. I ran a hand over my face. "So what happens now?" Carson slid a card across the table. "We're going to keep digging. In the meantime, if you remember anything, anything at all, call us." I picked up the card and stared at it. This wasn't over. Not even close. I barely remembered the drive home from the station. My head was spinning, my thoughts tangled in knots too tight to unravel. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house felt different, like something hollowed it out while I was gone. Lauren's absence had been suffocating from the moment she disappeared, but this was worse. It wasn't just grief pressing down on me anymore. It was doubt. It was betrayal. Had she really drugged me? Had she planned this? I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me, and leaned against it for a moment, rubbing my face. The kids were at my sister's place for the weekend, thank God. I needed time to process all of this before I could even begin to figure out how to explain it to them. I poured myself a drink, whiskey, neat, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Lauren and I had sat here 100 times before. Talking. Laughing. Arguing about stupid things, making up just as quickly. And now? Now I was sitting here, trying to decide whether my wife was the victim of a tragic accident, or if she had orchestrated something I couldn't even begin to understand. I pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed to see something, some proof that this wasn't what it seemed. That Lauren wasn't who the detectives were making her out to be. I opened her messages. I'd gone through them before, after she first went missing, but I had only skimmed. Back then, I was searching for a clue, a sign of what might have happened to her. Now, I was looking for something else entirely. I scrolled. Texts from friends. From our kids. From me. And then. A name I didn't recognize. I frowned. The contact was just the letter B. No last name. No photo. My pulse quickened as I clicked it. B, tomorrow, 8 p.m. Same place. Lauren, I don't know if this is a good idea. B, it's the only way. My mouth went dry. The message was from 3 days before she disappeared. I scrolled further. Lauren, this is getting dangerous. B, you knew it would be. But we're almost there. I clenched my jaw. Almost where? What the hell were they talking about? I backed out of the conversation and went to her email next. If there was anything else, any sign of what she had been planning, I had to know. And that's when I saw it. A draft email, never sent. Subject, if anything happens to me. I clicked it open, my hands shaking. Jake. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this, any of it. But I didn't have a choice. There are things you don't know, things I couldn't tell you. I wanted to, but it was too dangerous. And now, I think it's too late. Please, don't believe everything they tell you. Just know that I love you. I love the kids. And I never meant to hurt you. But I had to do this. Lauren. The glass slipped from my hand, shattering on the floor. I sat there, staring at the screen, my breath coming in shallow gasps. This wasn't a confession. This wasn't an apology for an affair. This was something else. Something bigger. Lauren hadn't just disappeared. She had run. And whatever she had been running from. It wasn't just me. I read the email again. And again. My mind refused to accept what was right in front of me. Lauren knew something. She knew she was in danger. And she left without telling me the truth. I forced myself to take deep, slow breaths. My hands were shaking, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every instinct told me to call the detectives right away, to hand over the email and let them figure it out. But something stopped me. Please, don't believe everything they tell you. Her words burned in my mind. If I went to the police, what would they do? They were already suspicious of me. Already trying to fit me into a story where I was the grieving husband who had snapped after learning about an affair. And what if Lauren was right? What if there was something bigger going on? I needed to think. I needed time. I closed the email and stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I hesitated for only a moment before typing. Jake, who are you? I sent it to the number labeled B. It was reckless, I knew that. But I needed answers, and if Brandon Collingsworth was involved in whatever this was, I wasn't going to sit around and wait for him to come to me. A few minutes passed. Then, finally. B, don't text me. I gritted my teeth. Jake, I know about Lauren. I know she was scared. You're going to tell me why? Nothing. I stared at the screen, willing another message to appear. The seconds crawled by, stretching longer and longer. Just when I thought he wouldn't respond. B, not over text. Meet me. A location followed. A rundown gas station on the edge of town. This is a bad idea. Every rational part of me screamed to stop, to call the cops, to let someone else handle this. But I couldn't. Lauren had trusted this man enough to keep him in her life, even in secret. If she had written that email, knowing she might disappear, then this was my only lead. I grabbed my jacket and my keys. I was going to get answers. One way or another. The gas station looked abandoned. A single flickering light buzzed above the rusted pumps, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. There were no other cars, no people, just the empty lot and the distant hum of the highway. I checked my phone. 9:12 p.m. He was late. Or maybe he wasn't coming at all. I leaned against my car, arms crossed, scanning the darkened lot. The whole thing felt like a trap. I knew I should have told someone where I was going, but who? The cops? I didn't trust them. My sister? No way, she'd lose her mind. I was on my own. A low rumble cut through the silence. Headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter as an old sedan pulled into the lot. It rolled to a stop a few feet away from me, engine idling. The driver's side door creaked open, and a man stepped out. He was younger than I expected, early 30s, maybe. A lean build, dark hair, and tired eyes that darted around like he expected someone to jump out of the shadows at any second. "Brandon?" I asked, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. He hesitated, then gave a tight nod. "You're Jake." It wasn't a question. He already knew who I was. I took a step forward. "You're the guy my wife was seeing." His jaw clenched. "That's what they told you. Isn't it true?" Brandon let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. "Lauren and I weren't having an affair, Jake. That's just the story they want you to believe." My pulse spiked. "Who's they?" He glanced over his shoulder, eyes scanning the lot like we were being watched. Then he turned back to me, voice low. "You need to stop asking questions." I took another step closer. "Not gonna happen. My wife disappeared, and I'm done with the bullshit. Tell me what's going on." Brandon looked at me for a long moment, then let out a bitter chuckle. "She really didn't tell you anything, did she?" "Tell me what?" He exhaled sharply. "Lauren found something. At work. Something she wasn't supposed to see." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Brandon hesitated, then shook his head. "I shouldn't even be here. If they find out I'm talking to you." I grabbed his arm. "Who? Who are you afraid of?" He yanked away, glancing around again. "You think she ran away because of me? You think she just left?" "No, man. Lauren didn't disappear." He looked me dead in the eye. "She was taken." The words hit me like a sledgehammer. Taken. Not lost. Not missing. Taken. My mouth went dry. "By who?" Brandon shook his head. "I don't know exactly. But I know they're watching me. And if you keep digging, they'll start watching you too." I stared at him, my pulse roaring in my ears. "Tell me what she found." Brandon hesitated, then pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket. "This is all I have." He shoved it into my hands. "Take it. But after this? I'm done." I looked down at the envelope, my fingers trembling as I took it. When I looked up, Brandon was already backing toward his car. "Wait." He shook his head. "No more questions. Just leave it alone, Jake." With that, he got in his car, slammed the door, and peeled out of the lot, disappearing into the night. I stood there, breathless, staring after him. Then I looked down at the envelope. It was heavy. Thick with papers. Whatever Lauren had found, whatever had gotten her taken, it was inside. And I was about to open it. I sat in my car, gripping the envelope like it was a live wire, my pulse hammering in my throat. I wanted to rip it open right there, but paranoia sank its claws into me. What if Brandon was right? What if they were watching? I forced myself to take a deep breath and turned the key in the ignition. The gas station disappeared in my rearview mirror as I drove, taking a long, winding route back home, checking every few minutes to see if I was being followed. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I was shaking. I locked the doors behind me, double-checked the windows, then sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope. The weight of it pressed into my palms. I swallowed hard, then tore it open. Inside was a stack of documents, some typed, some handwritten. A few grainy photos. And something that made my stomach twist into knots, a printed email thread. The sender's name? Lauren Daniels. I skimmed the messages, my eyes racing over the words. Lauren had been emailing someone named RG. The subject lines were vague, concerns, or need to talk ASAP, but the content made my blood run cold. Lauren, March 7th, 8:32 p.m. I checked the numbers again. It doesn't add up. Money is moving where it shouldn't be. This isn't a simple accounting error. Someone is covering their tracks. RG, March 8th, 6:10 a.m. I told you to leave this alone. You don't understand what you're digging into. Drop it before it's too late. Lauren, March 10th, 11:45 p.m. I can't. This isn't just fraud. It's bigger. People are involved, people we know. I need to talk to you in person. RG, March 12th, 3:22 p.m. Stop. They're watching. My hands clenched the paper. Lauren wasn't having an affair. She had uncovered something. And whoever they were, they didn't want her talking. I flipped through the rest of the documents, my stomach churning. Bank statements. Company reports. A list of names, some circled, some crossed out. Then, near the bottom of the pile, a single sheet of paper with one line scrawled in Lauren's handwriting. If something happens to me, follow the money. A shiver ran down my spine. This wasn't just about Lauren disappearing. This was about why. And now. Now I was in the middle of it. I sat there, gripping the paper so tightly my knuckles turned white. Lauren had found something big enough to get her killed or taken. And now, just by reading these documents, I was tangled up in it, too. My first instinct was to burn everything. Shred the papers, delete the emails, pretend I never saw any of this. Maybe if I let it die, I could walk away. But then I looked at the last thing she wrote. If something happens to me, follow the money. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face. She wanted me to figure this out. I spread the documents out across the kitchen table, scanning them. There were company bank statements from the last 8 months, numbers that made no sense, accounts transferring money back and forth in ways that looked wrong. I wasn't an accountant, but even I could tell someone was covering their tracks. I pulled out my phone and typed Brandon Collingsworth into Google. A few basic results popped up, LinkedIn, some professional listings, but nothing interesting. Then I typed Brandon Collingsworth fraud, and a local news article appeared. Accountant under investigation for embezzlement. My stomach dropped. The article was from 2 years ago. Brandon had been suspected of shifting money around at a different company, but the case never went anywhere. Charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. So either he was clean, or someone made sure he walked away. I went back to the email thread. RG. Who was that? I flipped through Lauren's documents again, searching for the initials. Nothing. But then my eyes landed on a printed page, a list of names. Some were circled, some crossed out. And there it was. Richard Gable. R.G. My heart pounded. I grabbed my phone and searched his name. Richard Gable, CEO, Westport Holdings. Lauren's company. Holy shit. I had no idea what kind of fraud Lauren had uncovered, but if it involved the CEO himself, this wasn't just some accounting error. This was organized. Deliberate. And it was big enough that she had been silenced for it. I stared at the name on my screen. Richard Gable. If anyone knew what had happened to Lauren, it was him. I didn't know how, but I was going to make him talk. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind raced through everything I had learned, Lauren's warnings, Brandon's fear, the missing money, and now, Richard Gable. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for answers to come to me. If Lauren had been taken because of this, I was going to find out why. I spent the morning digging through everything I could find about Richard Gable. He wasn't just the CEO of Westport Holdings, he was well-connected, the kind of guy who played golf with senators and showed up at charity galas shaking hands with billionaires. His public image was pristine. But I wasn't interested in his charity work. I wanted dirt. And I found some. A few years back, there were whispers about him moving money around, investments that didn't quite add up, but nothing ever stuck. People who tried to investigate, journalists, former employees, backed off before anything serious came of it. Or maybe they were forced to back off. Lauren must have found something real. Something he couldn't afford to let slip. Which meant I had a decision to make. I could keep digging from a distance, try to piece this together on my own. Or I could go straight to the source. I pulled up Westport Holdings' website, found the main office address, and stared at it. Was I really about to do this? Lauren risked everything to get to the truth. Yeah. I was doing this. I arrived at Westport Holdings just after noon, my pulse pounding in my ears as I stepped into the sleek, modern lobby. The receptionist glanced up from behind a glossy white desk, offering me a polite smile. Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment? I forced a casual expression. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Gable. It's urgent. Her smile didn't falter. I'm afraid Mr. Gable is in meetings all day. I can take a message. He'll want to hear from me, I interrupted. Tell him it's about Lauren Daniels. The smile froze on her face. Just for a second. A flicker of recognition, or maybe panic, before she recovered. I'll see if he's available, she said, picking up the phone. I stepped back, my heart hammering. A minute later, she looked up. Mr. Gable can see you now. His office is on the top floor. Take the private elevator. That was too easy. I felt it in my gut, this wasn't going to be a normal meeting. Still, I nodded, keeping my face unreadable as I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and as it rose, a single thought pounded through my mind. Richard Gable knew something. And I was about to find out exactly what. The private elevator was silent, but my thoughts were anything but. I was walking straight into the lion's den. The fact that Richard Gable had agreed to see me so quickly didn't sit right. People like him didn't just drop their schedules for a nobody. No, he was expecting me. Maybe he had been expecting me for a while. The doors slid open to a spacious office, all glass walls and polished wood, the kind of place designed to make people feel small. And sitting behind a massive mahogany desk was Richard Gable himself. He was older than I expected, late 50s, maybe, but he carried himself like a man who had never lost a battle. His suit probably cost more than my car, and the smirk on his face told me he already thought he had the upper hand. Jake Daniels, he said smoothly, gesturing to the chair across from him. Please, sit. I hesitated, then lowered myself into the chair, keeping my expression neutral. You know who I am. He chuckled. Of course. I know a great deal about you. The way he said it made my skin crawl. I cut to the chase. Where's Lauren? His smirk didn't falter, but something flickered in his eyes. That's the question, isn't it? I clenched my fists under the desk. She was looking into something. Money moving through this company that didn't belong. What did she find? Richard exhaled through his nose, shaking his head like I was a stubborn child. You don't understand the world you're stepping into, Mr. Daniels. Lauren made the same mistake. She was brilliant, but she didn't know when to walk away. My jaw tightened. So you made her disappear. He let out a small laugh. Disappear? No, Jake. Lauren was given an opportunity. A choice. I frowned. What the hell does that mean? Richard leaned back in his chair. She came across certain financial discrepancies, yes. But she had no idea how deep it went. When she started asking the wrong questions, certain people took notice. My stomach turned. Certain people. He studied me, then smiled. You think I'm the villain here, don't you? He gestured around the office. You think I sit in this chair, pulling the strings? I assure you, Mr. Daniels, I'm merely a piece on the board, just like you. Just like Lauren. My hands clenched into fists. Where is my wife? Richard exhaled, then stood up. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city like he owned it. Lauren was smart. But smart isn't always enough. She had a choice, work for them, or disappear. I stood, my heart hammering. And she chose to disappear. Richard turned back to me, his expression unreadable. No, Mr. Daniels. She chose to survive. The air in the room felt thin. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Richard stepped closer, lowering his voice. Your wife is alive, Jake. But if you keep pushing, she won't be for long. A cold chill shot down my spine. Lauren was alive. But I wasn't sure for how much longer. I barely heard the hum of the city outside the glass walls. The weight of Richard Gable's words crushed everything else. Lauren was alive. For weeks, I had imagined her body lost at sea, her last moments filled with panic and cold. But now I knew she wasn't dead, she had been taken. Forced into something. And I had walked straight into the office of the man who knew exactly where she was. I forced myself to stay calm. If she's alive, I want to see her. Richard gave a tired sigh, like I was a child asking too many questions. That's not how this works. I stepped closer, fists clenched. Then tell me how it does work. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked back to his desk, picked up a sleek pen, and turned it between his fingers like he was debating how much he should say. Finally, he spoke. Lauren was given an opportunity. You're thinking too small, Jake. This isn't about missing money. It's about power, control, people who operate on a level you can't even comprehend. He met my eyes. And now? She's part of it. My stomach twisted. Part of what? Richard smirked. It doesn't matter. What matters is that she made her choice. I shook my head. No. You're trying to make me believe she just, what? Decided to leave her family? That she willingly disappeared? His expression darkened slightly. You're still not listening. She had no choice. If she had stayed, she'd be dead. If she ran, we'd find her. So instead, she took the third option. My hands trembled at my sides. Working for them. Richard nodded. Exactly. I wanted to punch him in the face. Instead, I forced my voice to stay level. If she's alive, then I want proof. For the first time, Richard hesitated. Then, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a slim black folder. He slid it across the desk toward me. I didn't move. Go ahead, he said smoothly. Take a look. Every nerve in my body screamed at me not to open it. But I had come too far to stop now. I reached for the folder and flipped it open. Inside was a photograph. A grainy security camera still. Of Lauren. She was sitting in a dimly lit cafe, wearing clothes I had never seen before. Her hair was shorter, darker. She looked over her shoulder like she was expecting someone. Or watching for something. She was alive. I stared at the image, my breath coming in shallow gasps. It was real. She was real. But the relief was short-lived. Because there was something different about her. Something in her eyes. She wasn't scared. She wasn't lost. She was, working. Like she belonged there. Like she wanted to be there. The realization hit me like a brick to the chest. Lauren wasn't just alive. She was one of them now. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred. Lauren. Alive. But different. This wasn't a woman being held hostage, waiting to be rescued. She wasn't scared, she wasn't desperate. She was calm. Focused. Almost like she belonged wherever she was. The worst part? She hadn't been forced into a cage. She had stepped into it herself. I clenched the folder shut and looked up at Richard, who was watching me like I was a piece on a chessboard he had just moved into checkmate. What did you do to her? My voice was quiet, controlled, but barely. Richard's smirk returned. I didn't do anything. I simply gave her a choice. Bullshit. I slammed my hands on the desk. You threatened her. You made her think she had no other option. He sighed, shaking his head. You still don't get it, do you? Lauren was smart. Smarter than you realize. When she found out what was happening, she knew she couldn't fight it. So she adapted. She survived. She made the right move. I gritted my teeth. You're acting like she joined a fucking book club. Richard chuckled. Oh, it's much more exclusive than that. I wanted to strangle him. To wipe that smug look off his face and make him tell me where she was. Instead, I took a slow breath, forcing my hands to unclench. Where is she? Richard leaned back in his chair, considering me. I could tell you. Then do it. But what would you do with that information, Jake? He tilted his head. Go find her. Show up at her doorstep. Drag her back home. Yes, I snapped without hesitation. His smirk widened. And what if she doesn't want to come back? The words hit me harder than I expected. I shook my head. She wouldn't just leave her family. Our kids. Richard shrugged. People change. When they see the world for what it really is, they start making different choices. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. Lauren had uncovered something she wasn't supposed to. She had been given an impossible choice. And maybe, just maybe, she hadn't had time to think of a way out. But she was still my wife. And I wasn't going to let Richard Gable sit there and tell me she was gone for good. I forced myself to stand, keeping my voice steady. I don't care what she's wrapped up in. I don't care who you work for. I'm going to find her. Richard's smile didn't waver. Then you'd better be careful, Mr. Daniels. I turned to leave, my pulse hammering, my mind racing with next steps. But just as I reached the door, Richard spoke again. One last thing, he said casually. If you do find her, make sure you're ready for the answer. I didn't look back. I just walked out. Because no matter what answer was waiting for me, I had to know. I drove without knowing where I was going. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tight, my mind a storm of thoughts crashing into each other. Lauren was alive. She had chosen this. Or at least, that's what Richard wanted me to believe. But was it true? Had she really walked away from everything, our life, our kids, me, for this, whatever this was? Or was she trapped in something she couldn't escape from? I needed answers. And I knew exactly where to start. I parked a block away from Brandon Collingsworth's apartment. He was my only real lead, the only person who seemed to want to help, before he bolted, anyway. If anyone knew what Lauren had really gotten involved in, it was him. The place was dark, a rundown building on the edge of town. I climbed the stairs to the second floor, checking the numbers on the doors. 2C. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. I glanced around the hallway. No security cameras. No neighbors peeking out of their doors. I made a split-second decision, testing the handle. It turned. The door swung open with a quiet creak. A bad feeling settled in my gut. I stepped inside. The apartment was trashed. Papers scattered across the floor, furniture overturned, drawers pulled out and emptied. It wasn't just messy, it had been searched. Someone had been here before me. And then I saw it. A foot. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped forward. Brandon lay sprawled on the floor, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the carpet dark. A single gunshot wound to the head. He never saw it coming. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. This wasn't just about missing money. It wasn't just corruption. This was a cover-up. A kill list. And Brandon had just been crossed off. I turned to leave, to get the hell out before whoever did this decided to come back. But then something caught my eye. A flash drive. It was on the floor near Brandon's outstretched hand, half hidden under a pile of papers. I didn't think. I just grabbed it. Then I ran. Back in my car, my hands were still shaking as I jammed the flash drive into my laptop. A single folder appeared. For LD. Lauren's initials. I clicked it open. Inside was a single video file. I hesitated only a second before pressing play. Brandon's face appeared on the screen. His eyes darted around nervously. He was filming himself on his phone, the camera shaking. If you're watching this, I'm probably dead. A cold chill ran through me. Lauren found something bigger than she realized. It wasn't just money laundering, it was people. They're using Westport Holdings as a front for something else, something dangerous. And Richard Gable isn't the one in charge. He's just a puppet. He took a shaky breath. She thought she could disappear, but they don't let people walk away. Not really. If you want to find her, you have to stop looking at the money. Look at the names. That's the real secret. The screen went black. My pulse pounded. Brandon was dead. Lauren was alive. And I had just stepped into something far worse than I ever imagined. I wasn't just searching for my wife anymore. Now, I was trying to survive. I sat there, staring at the black screen, Brandon's last words echoing in my head. Look at the names. I yanked the flash drive from my laptop, my hands trembling. The air in my car felt suffocating, my pulse too loud. Brandon was dead. Not just dead, executed. And if he was right, if Lauren was caught up in something beyond money laundering, then this was bigger than I had ever imagined. I needed to get somewhere safe. Somewhere I could go through the files without looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds. I drove without thinking, turning corners at random, making sure no one was following me. Eventually, I ended up in an old motel parking lot on the outskirts of town. It was the kind of place people went when they wanted to disappear. Perfect. I paid in cash, went up to my room, locked the door, and shoved a chair under the handle for good measure. Then I plugged the flash drive back in. The folder labeled for LD contained more than just the video. There were documents. Dozens of them. Some were spreadsheets, others were scanned copies of signed contracts. And then there was a text document titled Names. I opened it. A list. Dozens of names. Some I didn't recognize, but others sent a chill down my spine. Politicians. CEOs. Law enforcement officials. People with power. People who didn't show up in news stories for the wrong reasons, because they controlled the stories. And near the bottom of the list, one name stood out. Lauren Daniels. My breath caught in my throat. My wife's name was on the list. I stared at it, my mind racing. Was this a target list? Had she been marked for elimination? Or, was it something worse? I scrolled down. There was a note at the bottom, written in red. Initiation confirmed. Next steps in progress. Initiation. I felt my stomach drop. Lauren hadn't just uncovered this network. She had become part of it. Was that what Richard Gable meant when he said she had chosen to survive? Had she traded her life, our life, for this? I was still trying to process it when my laptop screen flickered. For a second, I thought the battery was dying. But then a command window opened on its own. Lines of code scrolled across the screen. The files on the flash drive, every document, every name, every trace of evidence, started deleting themselves. I yanked the drive out, but it was too late. Everything was gone. And then, a single line appeared on the screen. Stop digging. Or you won't get another warning. A chill ran down my spine. They knew. They had been watching me this whole time. I slammed my laptop shut, my mind spinning. There was no way back now. Lauren was alive. She had either joined them or was trapped inside something she couldn't escape. And if I wanted to find out the truth, I had to move fast. Because now, they were coming for me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the motel room, my back against the door, gripping the phone in my hand like a lifeline. My laptop was useless, the files were gone, erased like they had never existed. But I didn't need them anymore. I had seen enough. Lauren wasn't missing. She wasn't dead. She had been taken, or worse, she had chosen this. And now, whoever was behind this? They were watching me. I had two choices. I could run. Forget everything. Let Lauren go and pretend none of this ever happened. Or I could find her. And if I did that, I wasn't just risking my life, I was stepping into something I might never get out of. I pulled out my phone and opened Lauren's email account. The draft email was still there. The one she never sent. Jake. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this, any of it. But I didn't have a choice. There are things you don't know, things I couldn't tell you. I wanted to, but it was too dangerous. And now, I think it's too late. Please, don't believe everything they tell you. Just know that I love you. I love the kids. And I never meant to hurt you. But I had to do this. My grip tightened on the phone. She had to do this. But why? Was she forced into it? Was she trying to protect me, to protect our kids? Or had she really crossed a line, stepped into the darkness willingly? I needed to hear it from her. I pulled up the photo Richard Gable had given me. Lauren sitting in that dimly lit cafe, looking over her shoulder. Like she was waiting for something. Or someone. There was only one way to know the truth. I had to find her. I picked up my keys. I wasn't running. I was going after my wife. And no matter what I found at the end of this road, whether she needed saving or whether she had become something else, I wasn't turning back. Not until I knew for sure.